Hi everyone, this is Ari Kopel with Shattering the Matrix. Today we have a fantastic guest today. It's one of those very special and rare opportunities to have Loren Moret with us today. And we also have a very unique opportunity to speak with Rose Page, and she's going to be my co-host today. So Rose, I know you're with me now, so can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and, so that everybody can get familiarized with you?
Thanks for having me, Ari, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. I've been looking forward to this interview for some time. My name is Rose Page. As Ari said, I'm from New Zealand. This process, I'm a researcher in chemtrails, radiation. My main focus, I was slapped back to earth with the Christchurch earthquakes, in which several people died. This event was not natural, and it has been the reason for my action now. So I'm with thecontrail.com. It's a site over there. Pop over there, social network. Lots of people over there to help, fill you in. I really haven't got a whole lot to say about myself, Ari. We're here to speak to Loren today.
Absolutely.
And,
right.
I would like to
Absolutely. So for all of you who are familiar with Loren, of course, her work is impeccable. And for those who are not familiar with her yet, Loren Moret is a geoscientist with a varied and extensive background doing research in the earth sciences. She's traveled to 50 countries, conducted 20 speaking tours of Japan, warning about the danger of nuclear power. She worked for Dr. Louis Leakey on the history of early hominids in Africa, and she conducted environmental research in 2 U.S. nuclear weapons labs, provided also expertise on radiation issues to 5 parliaments. She served as an expert witness on nuclear and exotic weapons in 5 international war crimes tribunals. Ms. Moret is a past president of the international organization, the Association for Women Geoscientists. And after being invited as a plenary speaker to the annual Hiroshima and Nagasaki memorial ceremonies in Japan in 2000, she decided to dedicate her life to research and increasing public awareness of the dangers of ionizing radiation and nuclear technologies. And I'm telling you, and she's a whistleblower on top of that. So, amazing. What an honor to have you, Loren. I'm just stoked. So thank you so much for joining us. And I know we have a lot to cover today, really, really important topics. So let's get started. I think that one of the ones that we were kind of like talking a little bit behind the scenes that is kind of important, I think. Everything is important, but there's something happening in Ukraine. Is that correct? Something that we really need to know about?
It's very, very serious. Rose and I have stayed in touch. I'm in Berkeley, California, and she's on the South Island in New Zealand. And it's been amazing for the last couple of years sharing information with her because very, very similar things are happening in New Zealand that are happening here in California in the United States in terms of the New World takeover. Mm-hmm. And I've been watching the events in the Ukraine since probably May or June. This is 2014, and this is the result of the George Soros color revolution, the Orange Revolution, that occurred in about 2006 in the Ukraine. And of course, this is all Rothschild, and at the very top, it's the Jesuits running these global disasters, global wars, land grabs, money grabs, genocides, and then creating, of course, many countries with nuclear refugees. And the war in the Ukraine, it's really a separatist movement in the eastern part of the Ukraine where they've used thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of depleted uranium weapons since April of 2014, nearly a year. And foreign countries such as Lithuania, Britain, Canada, the United States, and other countries, not Hungary, I don't think, Latvia, have been, Moldova, Azerbaijan, Bulgaria, they're all involved in providing different kinds of aid, military equipment, advisors, weapons to the Ukrainian government soldiers. And if you want to know what a new world order war is like, if you want to know what the Jesuit minuet in terms of rolling up this whole planet, country by country, this has been a very, very good lesson in the power hierarchy, how the soldiers are being wasted on the battleground deliberately by the Ukrainian government to kill off their government troops so that the government will have to hire mercenaries.
Wow.
And then, of course, the oligarchs are very, very involved. They manipulate the elections. There's an oligarch appointed in every province of the Ukraine. That's not really electing a representative. That's appointing a financial criminal who's going to make sure that the New World Order gets the spoils.
Yep.
And there's been organ harvesting, and this is being done by troops, private troops embedded in the Ukrainian government troops. And they have refrigerated trucks on the battlefield.
Oh my gosh.
For the organs, which are taken straight to hospitals. It's an unbelievable nightmare, and I'm really, really upset this week because of it's winter time. The militia, who are the Kazakh troops, but they're from Kazakhstan, but maybe hundreds of years ago. And they are very, very, very excellent warriors because they were equestrian nomads, and their history, you can go back 20,000 years, and they've always been there. And they actually introduced the wheeled chariot and the horse from Central Asia, Przewalski's wild horse, to the Sumerians and the Assyrians and the Egyptians. These are from the Bible. I'm talking about a long time ago. Yeah. So what's happening now in the middle of all the battles and the superior weapons that the Ukrainian troops have, the Novorossiyan militia, volunteer militia, who are mostly Cossacks, they have the skills of warfare from thousands of years of experience, and they're much better warriors than the Ukrainian troops, despite all of the advanced weaponry. And of course, we've seen this before in Lebanon when Israel attacked Lebanon, and Hezbollah didn't even have any planes. The Novorossiyan, or the Eastern pro-Russian separatists, had no planes either, but they had shoulder-mounted missiles, and they shot down all of the Ukrainian planes in a couple of months.
Wow. Unreal.
So what has happened now, it's winter, it's cold, the Ukrainian government is bankrupt, they're out of coal, they have had a history of stealing the gas, the natural gas, out of Russia's gas pipeline that transits the Ukraine into the European countries. And the Ukrainians, since that pipeline was built for the Russian transit of natural gas to Europe, they've had nothing but trouble with the Ukrainian politicians or officials stealing the gas out of the pipeline. So now Putin has said, you owe us 13 or 14 billion dollars. We will sell you natural gas, but it has to be prepaid, and you have to make a minimal payment on what you owe us of $3 billion. Well, the Ukrainian officials, this coup government, it's an illegal government, the officials have stolen all the gold and the money from the country. Now they're divvying up and auctioning off all the natural resources, the government infrastructure, and they still don't have money for coal or gas. And so in the middle of this, about a week or two ago, all of a sudden there was very high levels of radiation being reported at Latvian radiation government monitors, and then it showed up in Greece, and the levels in Greece are horrendous, and this is actually, the Russian scientists have said, a Chernobyl level accident, and yet no one's talked about it.
Wow.
And so this is just this is a HARP event. Mm-hmm. I'm certain that Soviet era nuclear reactor at Zaporizhzhia, which is sort of south of Kiev above the Black Sea, mm-hmm. was subjected to a HARP beamed weapon of some kind. And we still don't know exactly what happened in the reactor, but I can tell you it's bad because it's a Soviet-era reactor from the 1980s, and they have hexagonal-shaped fuel rods that fit into hexagonal-shaped holes in the reactor, where the rods go into the reactor, and the U.S. forced the Ukrainian government to purchase American fuel rods from Westinghouse that are mixed plutonium and oxide and uranium oxide fuel, when the Soviet reactor was only designed for uranium, and the plutonium and uranium together are very unstable, and so they put these rods, American rods, with a square cross section into the hexagonal holes, and they have irregular heat patterns, and there's twisting and warping, and the rods get stuck, and then you get a Chernobyl style event. So unfortunately, that is a global event that has not been covered in the mainstream media, and it's very, very serious, and it's in addition to the Fukushima disaster, which is still ongoing.
Oh, yeah. And then those winds are probably going to be covering part of the planet, and of course, like you said, mixing together with Fukushima. It's global. It's a global disaster. So who's the culprit of this, you think?
Oh, the U.S.
I just had to have it on record.
Yeah, it made a bigger mess, and the SBU, which is the Ministry of Internal Affairs, or the spy ministry in the Ukraine, the two bottom floors of their building in Kiev have been taken over by the CIA. Now, I also looked at the wind map immediately, globally, which is on the internet. It's on our website, lorenmoret.info. There's a link to it, but you can just do a search for wind maps, global wind maps, and these are from official U.S. government data. And these are buoys in the oceans all over the world that constantly transmit in real time the wind patterns and also radiation numbers. And So you can look at this globe and turn it around and you can rotate it, manipulate it with your computer. So you can see where they're shooting plumes of radiation and where are the nuclear typhoons. Where are they and where they headed for? They usually turn into polar vortexes. And you can see on the map, the wind map, after the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant had a number of explosions on November 27th, that certain countries are using HARP to heat up their territory. And I mean, this goes to the border, following every little irregularity around the border. And they make a high pressure zone. So it's like putting a glass dome over a country or a region, and the radioactive contaminated air masses just go right over it. So what countries do you think are being protected? China and Russia, South America and Central America, and the Habsburg Empire countries, Portugal, Spain, all the way over to Austria and Prussia and those areas, Italy. Those are all former Habsburg Empire countries, and that's where the Jesuits operate out of. The old Habsburg Empire, Holy Roman Empire, is where the Jesuits operate out of, and this is all being carried out by the Jesuits.
Wow.
So the U.S., in fact, is a de facto public military, but behind the scenes, everyone in Obama's administration, including him, is Jesuit trained. All 7 of the U.S. intelligence agencies, all of the chiefs are Jesuit trained, and it is the Farnese family, which I've told you, Ari, since you are from Cuba, that Fidel Castro is actually a Farnese, and the Farneses are ancient Persian families that moved into the Mediterranean region. They were the Etruscans and built 12 Etruscan cities. Then they were in the Roman Empire, and they were also popes and papal families in the Catholic Church and the Vatican, and they run the Vatican Bank. They have nothing to do with any religion, even though they wear the robes of the Catholic Church. But in fact, they're atheists or Marxists or just whatever they want to be, including Fidel Castro. And he is from a ducal family in Italy from Pope Paul III. That would be, he's directly descended from Pope Paul III, whose name was Alessandro Farnese. And Alessandro built a 5-sided pentagon-shaped military structure, and he started the Jesuits in Italy. And that Villa Farnese, which his grandson finished, Alessandro Cardinal Farnese, 2 generations later, built a pentagon-shaped edifice of many, many war rooms and many floors where the Jesuits moved in and used as their headquarters, and all of the world wars since the 1500s, all the disasters, everything has been planned there. And in 1812, the War of 1812, the British were sent by the Jesuits to burn down the new capital of Canada, and the next day they burned down the new capital of the United States.
Oh, wow.
And the Farneses bought the land and rebuilt both capitals. They own the buildings, they own the land, and they control both governments, and they completely own and control the Pentagon of the United States.
So, in effect, Loren, there's a global template here, isn't there? This has been used since the 1500s. I'm seeing, our situation in Christchurch is very much the same. Move in, destroy the place, land grab, make it worthless. We've got high levels of radiation here, in a country that's nuclear free. So extraordinary. Since the 1500s, this is a Jesuit template.
This is the Jesuit template, and the Jesuits are much older than that. They're just rebranded from the Roman Empire, the Parthian or Persian Empire. 3,000 years of these templates. So they've got file drawers in cabinets in the Villa Farnese and in the basements of the catacombs of the Vatican. And when they're ready to assassinate Milosevic or Princess Diana or President Kennedy or whoever they're assassinating, they just go into their drawers and they pull out a file, and there's an assassination plan. And what happened is with Milosevic, they had a plan to kill him in a car accident, but instead they murdered him or assassinated him in prison in The Hague. And so when they were ready to assassinate Princess Diana, she had produced the two heirs they wanted. They just took out that file that they were going to use on Milosevic, and they used it on Princess Diana. And they're just so matter-of-fact and nonchalant, and they're really very arrogant about it, too. They think what they're doing is right. There's a lot of inbreeding. There's a lot of insanity and mental illness. And this scheme of theirs to completely and totally control every living person and thing on this planet, and to subject humanity to complete slavery by destroying the spirituality and the love and the intuition and things like that that make us human. Even animals have that.
Yep.
Those are things that they want to destroy.
Yep, absolutely. That's exactly what they're doing. So what's the connection? What's going on, too, then, especially now that we're speaking about Fukushima, the radiation levels, and this nuclear plant in the Ukraine? You had mentioned to me something in reference to the El Diablo Canyon, the Diablo Canyon and nuke plant in California. You're feeling that something similar could happen there, too?
Well, I want Rose to tell us also about what's happening in Christchurch, because it concerns Department of Homeland Security and FEMA, which are U.S. government agencies that were illegally set up by Colonel Oliver North during the Vietnam War. The weather engineering and everything that they're doing with HAARP, geoengineering, was first tested in a program called Project Popeye in Vietnam. So what we're seeing are the technologies and the programs developed in foreign wars that were really for domestic use, and they're coming home now. And not only that, Janet Napolitano, who was appointed Secretary of Homeland Security under Obama, well, she just left Homeland Security a year ago and became the president of the University of California, which is the manager of the U.S. nuclear weapons laboratories.
Wow.
And suddenly, what I'm seeing here in the San Francisco Bay Area is just a mirror of what Rose has been reporting from New Zealand. The same things are happening. And I said, what? And she said, yes, Janet Napolitano, Homeland Security, and FEMA were here during the Christchurch earthquake, and I went, oh my God. So I started doing research and reading about it. And Ari Ann Rose, she shopped all over the world and marketed FEMA Homeland Security contracts to 15 Commonwealth countries, including New Zealand. And so the Department of Homeland Security is basically the Jesuit Gestapo. It's a fascist, Nazi organization, exactly what happened under the Germans in World War II and Hitler, because Hitler based his organizational structure and operation on the Jesuit framework.
Huh. That makes sense. That's crazy.
And of course, then you want to say, well, what? You know, I always thought something was strange about Fidel Castro. You know, he said he lived on $36 a month. Yeah, I bet he did. It happens that Forbes magazine named him as one of the 10 richest men in the world.
Okay, Loren, I just want to go back and talk on those Christchurch points. Listen, we have lost your video.
Oh,
are we able to disconnect and reconnect? I think it's important that we have you there.
Okay, just tell me.
Oh, here we
is
go.
It up?
I think it's coming
Okay.
back up. I think it's coming back up.
Yeah, just tell me when it happens. Yes, please do that, Rose.
All right.
It's just,
Here we are.
I'm so profoundly disturbed by what you've been telling me. I really want you to inform the public about it. Everyone needs to know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you very much for giving us, a voice to this. And at 12:51 p.m. New Zealand time on February the 22nd, 2011, the city of Christchurch was hit by a 6.3 magnitude aftershock. Our initial quake was 7.4, later downgraded to a 7.1. The first quake hit on September the 4th of 2010. We had, I stopped counting the aftershocks at about 13,000. Now, Christchurch is a very stable place. Up until this point, the folk that lived down there have said that they've felt probably 2 earthquakes in for the many years prior to this quake hitting. Now, it killed 181 people, the February quake, and then, of course, 3 weeks later was the devastating Fukushima accident. Now, the event, there were several things going on around the event. Janet Napolitano was due to come to New Zealand at the time, but she cancelled just prior. However, there were 8 members of Congress here in Christchurch at the time. Unheard of in little old New Zealand. We've had very bad relationships with the US because of our anti-nuclear policy. So, we keep the ships out of the waters. We don't have nuclear facilities here in New Zealand. All right, now some coincidences around the quake, and this is from memory, so you'll have to bear with me, but the day before the quake there were upwards of 1,000 personnel from the New Zealand Army, the Navy and the Air Force gathered down the road in South Canterbury. We don't have these massive drills. We are not America. We're clean, green New Zealand. We're the nice guys. We're the guys that come in to clean up after the mess. So we have this massive drill. Now, this was just down the road in South Canterbury and North Otago. It's the largest joint forces operation held in New Zealand for 20 years. At the same time, as I said, we had Congress here, we had FEMA here, Tad Allen, there's a name that we all know and love, that gentleman was here as well. As I said, never before done. Now, at the same time, we had a conference in Christchurch, which meant that we had several doctors and surgeons there on call. There were extra troops in from overseas. I mean, it's quite insane, the coincidences happening then. Now, just before the quake, an hour before the quake, and regardless of them having a full day planned, the 8 members of Congress were shuttled off to the airport, and they were sitting in Parliament when the quake happened here. They were sitting in Wellington when Christchurch fell.
Wow.
That was
terrible.
And at that time, I mean, we were in a lot of trauma, having been under constant earth movements, all the heart, frequencies were totally visible in our skies for a year prior, and of course I had been researching chemtrails, so I knew that this was all wrong. A lot of things went down that day, folks. We lost our people, and that was it. That was it for us. So I mean, there's so much more to this. I can fill you in on. I'll go and find actually an article written by Jeffrey Wefferson. He was the gentleman that blew the whistle on the 3 reactor meltdowns, and he was absolutely hit by troll shells from all over the globe. The poor guy, when he released that information, he released it on our site, had 62,000 hits overnight. And then we had Alex Jones's mob and everyone else hit our site, trolled it out of the place, and the poor guy, ended up pulling the blog. The only other person talking about this at the time was Loren. So allow me to find this article. It's important information. Down in Christchurch now, we're barely rebuilt. We have had to borrow. I've lost count of the money that we've now borrowed from the Fed to rebuild our beautiful city. Yeah. Our garden city is absolutely shattered. I go down there now. There are Tetra towers everywhere. There are Gwen towers everywhere. The Sugarloaf Tower beams down over that city like something out of Lord of the Rings. I went very hard into the research down there with a woman called Penny Hargraves. She showed me how where the worst of the earthquake damage was at intersecting points of the beams from the towers. So the only place that wasn't really damaged in Christchurch was the airport. And this area is the only area where these tower beams were not running. How did she have that information? She had a high court case up against a group that had put a tower on or next to her property, which started killing her animals, killing her horses. Now, the result of this is the tower system that hangs down over Christchurch is owned by none other than Mitt. Who was your guy that ran against Obama?
Mitt Romney.
There you go, Mitt Romney. Yeah. He owns the system, evidently, over Christchurch. This is work from Penny Hargraves.
Mitt Romney is a Mormon, and he's Jesuit trained. I mean, deep. And the Jesuits started the Mormons. And they've used them to do many projects, and especially to be missionaries all over the world. And what they did was they created something called the Mormon Genealogy Project. And as these young people were mandated to go on and do missionary service as young Mormons, they're required to for 2 or 3 years. They've gone to all the churches and locations where birth and death records are recorded all over the world and copied them. And they said, well, we're doing this so that we can go to heaven and know all of our generations. What they're actually doing is acquiring a bloodline database so that they can target and cull and eliminate certain bloodlines that they don't want on this planet anymore.
Wow.
So it's selective eugenics.
Wow.
And I think what I did want to ask you, I wanted to ask you a few questions about the earthquake. Were there HARP trails over Christchurch before this happened or when it was happening? And does anyone know how many days they were visible before the earthquake happened?
Yes, well, I was watching them prior to the original quake on September the 4th and had been watching them for a good year before that, and they became very, very intense. They were so bad, Loren, that I phoned the mayor here, who I had given a presentation to prior to the quakes, and he actually, Kevin Hayes, to his credit, got up and started fighting for us when he recognised what was happening. I called him one night just before the quakes. The skies were purple, green, these were the colours of the clouds, green, purple, orange, red, they were lined with blue. And I was watching this in my sky, and people were out there holding their babies under it going, isn't that beautiful? I was in my home bawling. I rang the mayor and I said, where are you right now? I said, you need to get up on the hill and have a look at this. So after that, he started petitioning our government. Of course, he was later sidelined off and given this nice little management job with the opposition to what we were talking about, and he's got this nice little shut-up job. I have the deepest respect for him for stepping up for us. He wrote several times to the government just to get they're contrails and they're coming out, the normal garbage we get. So he got so angry, in fact, that he said bollocks to our Minister of Environment. So he's been nicely handled and moved on. Lovely fella, very grateful to him, and I absolutely understand why he had to step back. He was one of the few that did it. So the HARP was absolutely visible. It was so intense, Loren, that over the February period, we had a lot of violence. We had a lot of the people in our town are flipping out everywhere. We had seals slaughtered. We had, and I mean a lot of seals. Over 70 seals were hit, battened. Our children were pulling kids from Christchurch out of cars and beating them up. This is a lovely little fishing village, Kaikoura. 2.5 hours from everywhere. And they're lovely, laid-back people. And suddenly we had violence. It was insane. I sat there one day for half an hour trying to remember my password to get into my site that I go into several times a day. I couldn't remember my name. Look, I even did an IQ test at that time because I was concerned about how my brain was jellified and everyone else around me. And I barely reached the level of being able to write my name. I got about a 91. I've done that same IQ test since, and 138. Yeah, so the mind control aspect of HARP or whatever hit us at that time, it was certainly waves, and I had all symptoms of radiation poisoning. So yeah, that's what happened in Christchurch. Along with this, I want to say Anadarko, an oil company from Texas, had moved in around our coastlines and had started seismic testing. All right, so important, but we'll get back to that. Please carry on, Loren.
The mind control application on HARP. I observed early research in the 1960s in the monkey colony. There was a secret monkey colony at the University of California at Davis where I was an undergrad. And some students work part-time, in the monkey colony. It was hidden out in an old peach orchard. UC Davis is out in the center of an agricultural valley, and there's not much of anything there except almond trees and walnut trees and students and the campus and tomato fields. So they hid the monkey colony in the peach orchard, and they're still using it. This is 2014 to do experiments. But the students would come back and they said the top of the monkeys' heads were cut off, and they had wires coming out of their brains. And Edward Teller, we call him Dr. Strangelove in the United States because he was such a psychopath. I have a photo of him in the 1964 standing in the Applied Science Department dedication ceremony for that facility, which was built at Davis so that they could apply the animal studies for human application. And this is with the mind control. And a lot of the experiments were on creating rage and anger and emotions and doing all kinds of things with the animals. And and then they started testing it on Americans and Canadians without anyone's consent. They would erase people's memories, and there are middle-aged and older people in Canada now who've been in beds with their memories erased since they were in their late teens or early 20s.
Wow.
And lots of people were subjected to these experiments. It's completely illegal. The U.S. couldn't do it to their own people, except they did it anyway. So they went up to Canada and did it to Canadians with the collaboration of the Canadian government and Canadian institutions. Now, it seems like a fantastic, unbelievable, wild sort of program, but in fact it's scientifically based. And the Jesuits, throughout their history, which through the rebranding, it goes back 3,000 years. And they've always been scientists. They've always been interested in science since their time in ancient Persia. And they are particularly interested in waves, energy waves. And that's very, very important because Einstein's formula, E equals mc squared, translated into plain English, it means that energy in the form of waves, it can be photons of light, it can be electricity, but it's energy in waves, transmitted in waves. And there's a whole universe of energy. We're living in a very, very dynamic universal system, but our solar system is too, and so is our planet. And what that formula of Einstein's means is that energy is equal to mass times a constant, which is the speed of light, squared. And it means simply that everything in the universe is either mass, solid material, or it's energy waves, and you can transform it back and forth. For instance, the sun shines on our planet, and trees grow, sometimes for 500 years, old oak trees or whatever. And when they die and fall down, they're cut up and made into firewood. Okay, that's mass. That tree is mass. The sunlight that gives that little seedling the energy to become a giant tree is waves. And so when you put the wood into a fire to burn it, you're turning it back into waves from mass.
Right.
So everything in the universe on the Earth is either in the form of energy, waves, or mass. And so these strange people, these ancient Persians, who were very, very good mathematicians and scientists, ended up traveling from Central Asia through thousands of years, and they ended up in Italy, and they started the Jesuits. But they had many other schemes and scans over 3,000 years. You can imagine what they know. Plus, they always steal the libraries when they're destroying a country.
Right.
Because the libraries have the knowledge, so they have the accumulated knowledge of civil society, of humanity, locked in their basements and catacombs. And the Jesuit minuet basically is very simple. It's 3 words. First they embrace, then they enfold, and then they extinguish. And they harvest everything, they steal everything, they loot everything, and then they destroy everything. The living things, humanity, the cultural signs and symbols, the relics, and then the very last thing they do, it's like salting the earth. They completely destroy the environment and poison it.
Right. Well, that's certainly what's happened here, Loren. I used to be a huge advocate for bringing folk down under. I've many times I've said to people, look, I can see what's happening on your end of the planet. Come down here. Imagine my horror when one of those people came down here and said, Rose, look up. It was a Canadian that slapped me in the face with that one.
Oh,
and my life has never been the same since, and that was prior to the quakes. So now, Loren, can I talk a little about Antarctica? And this is very empirical. This is for people to see that America is deeply involved. They're the puppets, of course, to their masters, but is very deeply involved in destroying the Pacific at the moment. Right now, basically, a lot of people got a lot of theories about why the planet's shaking, but most folk don't know that there are intense oil, and I suspect this is a big cover, but there are intense oil operations going on all through the Pacific, and particularly around New Zealand. We had fog banks suddenly grow up on the horizons. They can move these fog banks up and down. I've seen bomb-type clouds come up from behind them. They've never quite lifted it quite high enough to cover the cloud matter that explodes from behind them. This was happening during and after the quakes. We've had massive floating arrays out here that I've never seen skies like the waves that were through our skies during one period of that year, and those antennas were definitely floating off our coast. I'm in a unique position. I have the coast over here and the mountain right there, so I see 2 operations.
Could I just ask you for a minute, what were the antennas? Were they flat array antennas on ships? Obviously, I didn't sight them. All I could see and all I could record were the waves that were coming. But Loren, these were so intense. They were just killer, and I have never seen or experienced anything like them since. They were definitely floating arrays. They were from ships. Could have been that lovely platform of yours, the SBX platforms. Anything here is possible. I know that we were under military lockdown, of course. Nobody has ever mentioned radiation. One of the leads that we took on this was, I need to say that 3 hours after the killer quake on the 22nd of February, our government signed up a seabed mining deal. So Anadarko could, and basically America can come in here now, and anyone can come in here, and they're mapping
They're seismic mapping our shorelines, and this technology has a hell of an effect on the people on land. Our whales are beaching prior to these quakes, and prior to the Christchurch quake, whale beachings down in the areas where the major antennas are. You know, we've got arrays. We've got one at the bottom of the South Island that is connected to an array in Tasmania. You know, these are massive, and this is all part of the Antarctica project. It's the Tiger arrays. So, you know, when you start digging, it all comes back to Antarctica, but we'll get there. So anyway, with Anadarko, one of the things you need to know about Anadarko, we looked into this, and Jeffrey Wefferson, great researcher, environmental researcher, and he's out there looking after the marine life. He found out that James Hackett was the director of Halliburton. Now this is the board members of Anadarko, the Texan oil company that moved in here. There was a ship out on our coast, working off the coast the day of the quake. And so he went and checked these out. CEO, James Hackett, director of Halliburton. He was, you know, a member of the Trilateral Commission. Luke Corbett, director of Kerr-McGee, you know, the plutonium reprocessor. Loren, you would be very familiar with that.
Yeah.
Of course, he's connected to Brzezinski and Rockefeller. Luke Corbett, I said Peter Guerin, Secretary of both the Army and the Air Force. Paula Reynolds, Director of BAE. She was a major defence contractor specialising in advanced weapon systems. Now, she just happened to build the HARP phase upgrade, okay? So, you know, BAE Systems received $35 million for the HARP program.
Wow.
These are the folk that came in down under and you know, and they were so okay. Later on, I had the opportunity to face Anadarko and face off all our ministers. Most interestingly, they all turned up in my little town because they want to put an oil rig out here in our beautiful paradise. So they turned up here at the Marae. Marae is a meeting house for our Māori people. In those places, you must be very respectful. You have your turn to speak, but you know, this isn't, they have their protocol and it must be followed. So I finally got my chance to ask a question. The first thing I did was tell them who, that the Navy warfare program on that day had been extended for another 5 years. And this was going to give them rights to kill off another 35 million marine mammals without any recall. There is nothing you could do about that.
And you're talking about the U.S. Navy.
This is correct.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So this program had been extended on that day. They didn't want to know about that. The Kamatua there just said, well, you know, what's that got to do with anything? And so I told them who the directors of Anadarko were, and they said, well, help us out here. I said, where was Anadarko on the day of the quake? You have never seen anything funnier. All these ministers and these board members all got up and got into this huddle, and everyone in the room was like, wow, I don't know what this lady's on about, but this is interesting. And then I came back, and the Minister of Environment looked me in the eye, and he said she was in Wellington. That's a lie. We have a written and signed statement from someone who was on her deck on that day. He was crewing on her and he said they were there that day and the day after. All right, so Anadarko have a huge input into whatever is happening around New Zealand, but then, you know, under this guise of 5 years of seismic testing, I suspect they're putting in all the technology required to enter Antarctica.
They are.
That now with you.
They are, and Halliburton is actually a front for the Jesuits, and the Rothschilds are an intermediary between the public, they're the public face, and the Jesuits. And this came out of the Habsburg Empire. Amstel Meyer Bauer was actually the first Rothschild. He changed the family name to Rothschild, And he lived on Hudenstrasse in Frankfurt in the 1700s, and he had 5 sons and 5 daughters. And the Schiff family, which we know in international banking, shared the house with the Rothschilds, and their children started intermarrying in the mid-1700s. And so they served the Holy Roman Empire, emperor, and the Habsburg court for centuries. They're called Hof Judah or House Jews. They're the special advisors to, for instance, the Spanish court and the Portuguese court or the Habsburg court or whatever. But they've traditionally had a history of advising monarchies, and but they also work for the Jesuits. And let's see, what was I trying to say? So when Halliburton shows up, it's the Jesuits.
Mm-hmm. Huh. Can I go back to what you were saying, Rose, and then maybe you can follow up, Loren, with that, or either one can take that. What for the listeners that are not really aware as to what is going on in Antarctica, why this interest with Antarctica? Can you guys explore that, Loren? Can you expand on that?
Yes. When I was an undergraduate in the 60s, in the geology department, at Davis, I was the only girl in the department. And I went on and worked at Cambridge University in England doing research for Louis Leakey, and I met a Dutchman. And his grandfather had been the last governor of Dutch Indonesia. So my friend Martin had information and knowledge that other people might not have had from less exposure to world politics and geopolitics. And he told me then, and this was in the middle of the space race, he said there is going to be a gigantic fight over the mineral pie in Antarctica and the Arctic. He said the polar regions are of very great interest, and I know they're going to make a horrible environmental mess out of them. And I said, what are you talking about? He said the minerals, the mineral wealth. Now the Arctic is an open ocean, but the seafloor has mineral deposits, mostly oil and gas, which Putin has claimed for Russia within the Arctic Circle, because Russia has the most land that is connected to the Arctic Ocean. Right. And in order to share in the mineral wealth, to stake claims and to explore and then develop and everything, a country or a government, a state, must have a geologic structural connection and relationship to the polar region that they're interested in. So it's pretty easy in the Arctic because it's Canada. The U.S. doesn't really have much of a claim. It's Canada, mostly Russia, and then perhaps Norway and Sweden, maybe Finland. It's very different from Antarctica, which is actually 2 continents that collided and then welded together, and that is a very large land mass, and it's very, very old. It was originally, all the continents were one land mass called Gondwana Land, where the South Pole is located. But it started breaking up, and so pieces like Africa, Madagascar, New Zealand, Argentina, parts of North America all broke off, some of the Eurasian continent, and started floating all over the world. They were moved by plate tectonics. And so because the Norwegians were the first explorers to really do a lot of exploration in the Antarctic. They have the biggest piece of that pie, and it is like cutting up a pie when you look at the map and the territorial claims. So the width of the piece of pie is related to how much structural relationship and so forth, some of it is negotiated, your country has to determine a claim on Antarctica. And so Norway has the largest piece. The United States does not have a structural claim, but we have a lot of mind control bases there, at least 5, I would say. Russia has 7, Japan has 3, and the United Kingdom has at least 9. So because of the Falkland Islands, which actually belong to Argentina, the British carried out that war to take over the Argentinian, it's part of their landmass, Falkland Islands, because they do have a structural relationship, geologic structural relationship to Antarctica. They're a piece of the ancient Gondwana land. And then they're now annexing the island, the South Island of New Zealand, and Rose would be better able to explain it, but the British or the Queen, because she's the sovereign ruler, all of the land in the Commonwealth belongs to her, and all of the mineral claims, the mineral rights to the entire Commonwealth personally belong to the sovereign of the British Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. And so that's why cowboys and ranchers in Canada, I went up to campaign against uranium mining there at the invitation of a member of the Canadian Parliament. And he said, I woke up one morning and there were drilling rigs drilling for uranium out in my pasture. He said, and they drilled holes everywhere. And they left all the holes, and so now my horses and cattle are going to break their legs in those open holes that they left. And I said, well, do you know why that happened? And he said, no. And I said, because anyone who purchases property in the Commonwealth is only buying the top 12 inches of dirt. Mm-hmm. Everything below 12 inches belongs to the sovereign of the British Commonwealth.
Wow.
And she of course takes that she even takes it from the Americans. So, forget the whole Commonwealth. She also owns everything under your soil, Ari.
She personally owns British Petroleum. She personally owns over 50% of Royal Dutch Shell. That is shared with the monarch of Holland. And the Dutch East India Company and the East India Company and the Hudson Bay Company are all the same companies, but they're owned by different royal families or interests, and ultimately they're owned by the Jesuits and controlled by them. So I didn't know anything about any of this. I just wanted to go on field trips and go hiking and have fun and ride a bicycle in the rain and have a wet t-shirt and feel like I was really free. After I was invited to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki memorial events in the year 2000 in Japan, and I'd never been to Asia, and I was really afraid to go because I couldn't read the languages, I couldn't speak them, the food is different, and so I didn't have any money, so I got on a plane, and the organization that sponsored me sent me an airplane ticket. I had $20 in my pocket when I went to Japan for 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, I don't know how I'm going to eat But I know that peace marchers and women's movement doing marches across the United States, they ate out of garbage cans. That's how they survived. And some of them came back with babies even. And next souvenir. And so I went to Japan. Of course, they were just superb hosts. And they were wonderful to me. And it was that experience that changed my whole life. And I finally understood what nuclear weapons were and that it affects all living things. So in 2000, after I'd come back from that profound experience, I said, I'm dedicating the rest of my life to the radiation issue because I can, and I have a unique background that I understand the science, and I'll be able to make it transparent to the public. It's just common sense. We're all scientists, we just don't know it.
Yep.
And so I've met wonderful people on this adventure, real people who really love and who really care and who have passion, and Rose is certainly one of them. And thank you so much, Rose, for introducing me to Ari. And Ari hasn't had a chance to say very much, but
I'm listening.
Of course, what you have to say and your voice can be asking questions or making comments that people in the audience can't do. So what you have to say or what you have to ask or comment on is important too.
Absolutely.
I started one day. I just sat down after I'd studied all the science for 10 years, night and day. I mean, it was a passion, 18 hours a day, no holidays or anything for 8 years. And I just sat down and I said, wait a minute, this radiation pollution that's doing all this harm to the environment and humanity, living things, it can't be an accident.
Right.
This is deliberate. So I sat down on my computer in about 2010 and I did a Google search on University of California plus Skull and Bones.
Wow.
And it took me straight to the bankers, and boy, have I been having accelerated fun doing research ever since I asked the right question.
Oh my God. And that's exactly right. It's asking the right questions.
I love how you're so fearless in this, Loren, and you always manage to find a way to laugh about everything. And you're under intense attacking. Well, we know that many of us have experienced that. I know that we did during the quake time. But the way that you just keep smiling through it and finding a way to laugh, it is extremely precious. Someone sent me this morning something that, immediately I thought of you. And it was a quote from the Dalai Lama. And he said, "The world will be saved by Western women." And you, Loren, are up there leading the pack.
Yep, absolutely.
We're all doing it. I think that's what I like so much about this interview, is that when women come together, something different happens. And it's an energy, and it's a spirit, and it's empathy. It's so many things that many men don't have an opportunity, a chance to experience. But it's very powerful, and it's very beautiful, and I feel like I just feel like I'm blessed to be able to do this and to know people like both of you and other people I've met. They're wonderful men who have fought the fight also, but there's something about women coming together in a gathering and things start happening. So I do agree with you. And it's our spirituality that is the real weapon. And remember when America was trying to stop nuclear bomb testing, what stopped it? The final nail in the coffin of open air testing. And even President Kennedy was very, 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 very concerned about the effects of the radiation from bomb testing on American children. But it was when grandmothers, little old ladies in tennis shoes, pushing baby buggies with their grandchildren in them, surrounded the White House.
That's it. That's
it.
Yep.
And you know, you saying that a similar thing happened with the pots and pans revolution over there in Iceland. You know, literally they were out there banging pots and pans outside Parliament. Phenomenal. You know, here's the thing, ladies, something to think about from a spiritual aspect. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's an article that floats around about how the American military followed the best Indian trackers, American Indian trackers, and took the best of them in after testing them. And the first thing they did to these men was shave all their hair off.
Oh.
And then the men didn't have their abilities anymore. So perhaps, you know, perhaps we want to put that out there, guys. Grow your hair and come and join us.
Well, you know, the Greek women were losing all their children to these ridiculous Greek wars. I mean, that's what we're seeing now. And there's actually a play about it, a Greek play that's been adapted to, or a play that was written from the Greek story. But what the women did was they just quit having sex with the men until the war stopped. And you know how fast they stopped?
The greatest motivator, huh?
Wow, did that work? And you know, it may be a man's world in the daytime, but it's a woman's world at night.
I love it. I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard that. Actually, you know, it's a terrible weapon, really.
Oh well, it's an effective weapon, but you can use it in a kindly manner. You can be subtle about it. Not tonight, darling.
I've got a backache.
Could you take that tank out of our driveway? You know, things like that. Well, I'm just joking and everything, but women have actually more power than men. They just don't use it, or they don't know how to use it. We are in a global extinction right now because of Fukushima and nuclear technologies and what we don't know about this Ukrainian Chernobyl situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It's the largest one in Europe. 6 1,000 kilowatt reactors there. And they're from the 80s, they're from the Soviet era, they're old, they're leaky, the pipes are cracked and so forth. And that was absolutely triggered right at the time when the country was in a crisis for heat. And just when the really cold weather started, and just when the war was about to start again, and just to make everyone more miserable and to distract people, that nuclear power plant explosion took out one reactor. Now, the official media explanation from the president and other officials is that, there was an electrical shortage in the wiring yard, and it'll be ready in 3 days. It'll be back online. Well, that plant provides 22% of the electricity for that country.
Wow.
And they had to close their conventional power plants that use coal and natural gas because they can't buy it. They can't pay for it. And the militia in eastern Russia, in this war zone, are Cossacks, and traditionally they went into the Russian military but they're not needed so much now. So they work in the mines. They're the miners. They're very poor. They're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people. They still have their tribal integrity and traditions and everything. And it's all about community, and we can't do anything bad that will harm the tribe. And so I've heard many Cossacks on and off the battlefield saying, "Oh, but we can't do that because that would be harmful to our tribe." And so they kind of self-police themselves. But what I was getting back to is that some of these miners had continued mining through the summer because they were getting paid by the oligarchs who stole the mines. And so they have accumulated 2 million tons of anthracite coal at the mining sites, and that coal has been loaded into railroad cars. And so now the president of the Ukraine for 2 weeks has been saying, "That's our coal. We're going to come and get it with the army." And so 2 or 3 of the Cossacks went into enemy territory, stole a railroad locomotive, drove it back, and they have removed that trainload of coal. That's about $400 million worth of coal.
Whoa.
They've moved it out of the Ukraine.
Wow.
This is phenomenal. I mean, it's all about energy, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
You know, and like we're playing into their hands too. I mean, you know,
Absolutely.
they're talking about these clean sources of energy, but what are they doing? Well, they're just tapping, natural gas. Well, let's make that sound really clean and green, shall we? And you know, basically, they haven't got control anymore over the petro. But it's all planned this way, isn't it, Loren? I mean,
very.
I was really concerned today when I got your we got your email, and you said that the disaster, the accident, the nuclear accident over there is a repeat of Chernobyl.
Yep.
And you know, extremely high rads have been reported in Greece. We haven't said that. But you said there should be less than 20 microservants per hour normally, but Greece monitors level 7 to 8 million.
Yes.
Servants per hour over
Off the charts. Off the charts.
For 3 days and nights, and of course it moves on. And after it went through Latvia, and they almost never have high radiation levels at ground level, because usually the radiation is released up into higher levels of the troposphere and it starts mixing. But because the nuclear power plants are on the ground, and of course this is true of Fukushima too, it goes straight into the groundwater, the oceans. It rises up from the ground level, whether it's on a battlefield or a nuclear power plant. They're releasing it into the sky, and the troposphere, which is up from the ground up to about 60 miles from the surface of the Earth, is the most dynamic part of the atmosphere because of the rain and the storms and the vortexes, which become hurricanes and tornadoes and typhoons, and that causes tremendous and very rapid mixing. And so Chernobyl, Zaporizhzhny, any of these disasters, nuclear tests, are completely mixed in the whole global atmosphere in 1 year. So there's nowhere to hide. There's no way to clean it up. And it respects no borders. Radiation respects no religion.
Nope.
And radiation respects no socioeconomic class.
You got it.
So, yeah. So it's an equal opportunity killer.
Yep. I kind of lost both of you there on the video, but the audio is still playing. So I have a question, because this is like really important to address, because we're talking about this now. It's the Wigner effects, and also about that German pilot I think we need to talk about. I think that's a really important thing to discuss.
Right. Did you want to say anything, Rose? Oh, I think Rose dropped off.
Yeah, and so did you on my video.
I'm here, folks.
Oh, you are there. Okay.
Maybe you can try and turn your videos back on, but I can't see either of you. Anyhow,
It's okay.
on the Wigner effect, this is certainly something that we've enjoyed your interviews with Alfred on this subject, and Christina Consolo, someone I have a great deal of respect for, another very strong woman who's got her neck on the line every day. So in a nutshell, it's the disintegration, and we've got planes flying through this all the time, don't we, Loren?
Yes, we do. We do.
Okay, go ahead with.
Okay. I was reading. I was monitoring the Fukushima disaster, and I said huge volumes of radiation are going into the atmosphere. It's contaminating the whole entire air column of the planet. And it's also going into the ocean, which means the great conveyor belt of oceanic circulation, which goes around the Atlantic, and then it goes down around Africa and up to Southeast Asia and loops around the Pacific and then goes back around the Atlantic. So that's traveling at 5 miles an hour. That's very, very, very rapid. And it's a huge current that's like 3,500 feet deep and a couple of miles wide. It's carrying, transporting a lot of water very rapidly, and whatever contamination is incorporated in it. So I started thinking about what problems the radiation would create in the air column to living things and also mechanical things like airplanes and ships and so forth. And then I also was very interested in the oceanic transport as well. Where does it go? What does it affect? How does it affect living things in the ocean? And I found a paper from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. It was a report from the 1970s on the history of the Oak Ridge National Lab, which is where the uranium enrichment process is carried out. In other words, they mine uranium for nuclear weapons or nuclear power plants or for depleted uranium weapons. And it's the metal, the uranium is extracted. There are 3 isotopes that occur in nature. It's taken to Oak Ridge, and they pass the uranium hexafluoride gas through membranes, and they are able to remove 0.5% of uranium-235, which is what they put in nuclear power plant fuel or in nuclear bombs. And the rest, 99.5%, is uranium, but it's radioactive trash.
Wow.
So that's what they started using in the depleted uranium weapons. And it burns at over 5,000 degrees centigrade and forms a radioactive gas of nanoparticles. It's really a poison gas weapon. And, oh my good, it's working again. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So I found this historic paper on the history of the Department of Ceramics and Metals from the 1950s, when Oak Ridge was called the Clinton Laboratories. It was a government nuclear laboratory, but it was called the Clinton Laboratories. And it was managed by Monsanto. So I knew it was bad news. Mm-hmm. And so I was glancing through it, and I came upon this section about a Dr. Wigner, Wigner, who was from the Vienna region of the Habsburg Empire. And he was brought to the United States, probably secretly, during World War II, and made a Manhattan Project scientist to work on the nuclear weapons program because he was a mathematician, very serious mathematician. And then when the war was over, the Manhattan Project scientists were transitioned out, and they were rebranded the Jason scientists. And he became a Jason scientist, so I knew he was someone really special. So I was reading the section on him and his department on ceramic and metals, which he started. And he was brought there and funded, along with a lot of other paperclip German scientists, to work there on various projects and nuclear technologies. And I discovered that he was set up there with funding and laboratories and research money and everything to study the effects of ionizing radiation on metals and ceramic materials that would be used in the future nuclear power program. And they have to always start with basic mathematics, then they go to the scientific constraints, what's possible, what's not possible scientifically, and then when they know everything about the science of the materials, it's called material science, then they begin to design the reactors and use the right materials and know what the limits are on the materials. Well, in that little section, they started talking about the Wigner effect on metals and ceramics from exposure to ionizing radiation. And I was completely horrified, and I sent this information to Rose and other people. I wanted to share it because it was so profoundly disturbing. And what he found was that metals that are exposed to ionizing radiation, in other words, they're bombarded over prolonged periods of time, have something called the Wigner effect, named for him. And it's that the energy waves that are that escape from the nucleus of radioactive isotopes attack the surface of the metal and steal the electrons out of the metal atoms that form the lattice of the solid metal. And that weakens and embrittles the metal. And I found this research, and it happens to people too. We're living systems, but it does the same things to us. Sure. It's called radiation-related illnesses. It's called aging. It's basically entropy. Mm-hmm. It's that energy mass change back and forth. And so I talked to Christina, and I said to Radchik, and I said, Christina, this is affecting airplanes. We need to start investigating this and doing interviews on it and reporting to people. I mean, airlines and pilots and passengers, because passengers are getting huge radiation exposures just flying, to see their grandparents or to go on summer vacation or whatever. Yep. And what really tipped me off is that women going on flights in their first trimester of pregnancy were losing their babies. And they really are today, and it's accelerating because the radiation is continuously being released from Fukushima since it happened. Mm-hmm. It hasn't slowed down at all. It's gotten worse. And it accumulates in the environment. So as long as that plant is spouting radiation in gaseous form, in liquid form, in particulate form into the atmosphere and into the oceans, the levels are increasing. Mm-hmm. And we're inhaling it. We're drinking it in rainwater. We're drinking it in groundwater. We are eating food that grows above the surface of the ground, and that's all contaminated. But even the roots are in root vegetables, but not quite as bad as leaves that platform above the surface of the soil. And so what's been happening over the last year since I discovered the Wigner effects, what a nightmare. Well, at first, the first reports I got were from the Kadena military base in Okinawa, and 10 fighter jets that are used for training new pilots, young pilots, had lost parts of the planes just in midair, in mid-flight. Pieces started flying off of the planes. These are older planes that they use for training the pilots. And then another report came out, and they have the date and the time, and all of the military information is reported about these flights. And 4 pilots lost their cockpit canopies in mid-flight. If you can believe flying at 1,200 miles an hour, with just your helmet on, thank God they have oxygen masks. But it's much more accelerated in military jets that fly faster through the air column, so they're being exposed to higher levels of radiation, more radiation as they move through the air. And they also go down, up and down, and to all different altitudes. So they're kind of sampling the whole flight, the whole air column, as compared to commercial flights. Mm-hmm. But it's showing up now on commercial flights too. And for instance, Bolt came flying out of a propeller or a prop on a propeller jet. I forgot, turbojet, and it went through the exterior pane of a glass window where a passenger was sitting. If it had gone through the interior pane, both of them, the pressure from the inside in the cabin, it's pressurized, would have blown everyone in the windows and the doors out of the airplane, mm-hmm. and they would have instantly frozen at 35,000 feet and landed on the ground eventually as stiff as an ice cube. That's exactly what happened in MH17, the Malaysian Airlines Flight 17, that crashed in the Ukraine. It was mm-hmm. shot down, actually. And people were reporting, oh no, there are mannequins all over the ground. It's a fake photo and everything. It wasn't. They were frozen solid from that fall, from 33,000 feet to the ground. And things like that are starting to happen. Now it's getting worse. Christina went on a flight from upstate in Michigan to Utah to visit her daughter, and she had to make a plane change, going and returning to her home. So she was on 4 different airplanes. I think most of them were Delta, or all of them were, and she took photos out of her window at the surface of the wings, and there were pieces of tape, like duct tape, all over the wings, holding the wings together and covering cracks and holes and weaknesses in the wings. And I was just horrified. She said, well, the airlines have special tape they put on the wings on the...
That's reassuring, isn't it?
So all I want for Christmas is some of that airplane tape. If you give me any flight tickets, that's what I want with them. And so then what she and I have been watching over the last year, we've been gathering all of the news stories, is pieces of the engines are falling off, or flight controls, and the wings are dangling off of the wing, and the planes are having to go back to return to the airport they left from. And it was David Bowie or Sting or somebody took off from Scotland or England in his private jet with some friends about 3 weeks ago, and they heard this huge, horrible bang, and they didn't know what it was. They were sort of over the English Channel, so they just kept going, flying. And when they landed in Hamburg, they got out and walked around the plane, and the door had fallen off of a compartment on the back of the jet that something was loaded in, but that's what the explosion was. The door just fell off of the airplane.
Wow.
And the most affected, the very earliest reports, and the greatest number of reports of emergency landings were in the North Pacific, where the most radiation from Fukushima is concentrated because it hasn't had time to mix. And planes were landing maybe one a week 6 months ago on Hawaii or Guam or any island where they could land. The planes had problems with the hydraulics. Well, that's the landing gear. And what happens is there are metal pipes with a metal nipple on them, and the flexible rubber hose fits over that metal nipple. And there's a thin metal strap that you put around it and screw it tight, and that clamps the rubber tubing onto that nipple.
Right.
And so the problems are with those thin metal surfaces that have been exposed to all this Fukushima radiation for 3 years. Finally, the metal is so thin it breaks.
Oh.
And other things that are happening is the lithium batteries in some airplanes are just blowing up when they're sitting on the tarmac or in flight with no explanation. Air conditioning systems are going out. And eventually, I mean, it's very dangerous to fly now. Don't fly if you're pregnant. Do not fly if you're pregnant. Don't do that. You're exposing a fetus to ionizing radiation, and that affects their health history for the rest of their lives. It's so overwhelming to be talking about this, but this radiation is also damaging bridges, buildings. It's destroying the integrity of the atomic lattice in all materials. And now I found stories on 2 firefighting air tankers. They have older ones that last for a long time because they don't use them that often, so they need them to carry big amounts of water or chemicals to put out fires with. So they just do proper maintenance on them. But in the last 6 months, 2 of them in California had a crack on the top of the fuselage where the wings are attached to the tanker, and the wings just kind of folded and the plane fell out of the air.
Oh my Lord.
Loren, I'd like to talk further on this if we have some time.
Yes.
Okay. Qantas is an Australian airline. Their CEO is Alan Joyce. I noticed that Sky News and Channel 9 had both been reporting on, the Qantas planes being forced to turn around. So, just a few days ago, Qantas, Channel 9 actually reported that, paramedics assessed 80 passengers and crew for smoke inhalation after the second Qantas flight filled with smoke was forced into an urgent landing at Perth. All right, the plane was heading out and landed at Perth. I mean, they were miles into their trip and had to make an emergency landing. Now, Alan Joyce and all of his people, there's one person I particularly enjoy from the Qantas management lineup. He is actually pretty much a full-time troll on Metabunk. He operates as someone called Manuel Guacamole, but this gentleman's the health and safety manager for Qantas and a pilot. These people, what you're talking about with the Wigner effect, and suddenly these people are into big damage control, and they're just saying, oh, it's normal. It's normal. Now, one thing I know with operating our sites, I had a blog running for a while called Trains, Planes and Automobiles, because it was every day a train, a plane, or an automobile. There were major accidents. The trains up in Canada, for instance, look what's happening to them. I mean, they had accident after accident. What you're saying about the Wigner effect on metals, I suddenly understand. I suddenly understand why these bridges and all of these things, all of this is starting to happen. And I see there's been a big shutdown on that too. We don't talk about the bridges anymore, and we don't talk about the train accidents so much anymore. So,
who owns the media? It's the guys who did this.
That's right.
Loren,
of course they don't want us to know about it.
No, not at all. Loren, I would love it if you would tell us, please, about a contact that you had with a German pilot at some stage. This I think will help folk who get their head around some of this. I mean, nobody wants to swallow this. Nobody wants to believe that Japan is so irradiated that we just decided to have the Tokyo Olympic Games there. It's so clean and happy down in Japan that, we're all going to go to the Olympics and, kill half of our
athletes.
World athletes. Can we maybe discuss what this German pilot and you had to say?
Yes, well, basically, it pertains to him as well. But my friends in Japan, and I have a lot because I've done 20 speaking tours there since 2000, but I'll never go back again now. They have told me that they just nobody talks about Fukushima now. Everybody knows. Everybody has a Geiger counter in their purse or their pocket or whatever. Japan is so contaminated now that people are moving out of Tokyo. A doctor stated in the mainstream media it's too radioactive to continue living in Tokyo. So he took his practice and moved all the way across the island arc to the west side of Japan, facing China, because the radiation levels are lower there. So here is a conspiracy of silence. There are 3 mind control bases in Antarctica that are also controlling the minds of people in Japan, and they are just slowly dying. I mean, I almost had a nervous breakdown when Fukushima happened. I had my Geiger counter taped to my printer. It still is, for 3 years, and for 6 months I didn't go anywhere, out of my house or anything. I just sat there and wrote articles and did interviews with Alfred and did research to get the information out. So that's what the situation in Japan is. But I'm sorry, what was your question, Rose?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm getting a few mind blanks myself.
The German about the German pilot.
Oh, the German pilot. Yes.
German pilot.
Thank you, Ari. So this German pilot contacted me through my website, and he said, I'd like to talk to you. I'm a pilot in Germany, and a lot of the pilots are sick, and I'd like to ask you some questions. I read your article on the Wigner effect, and that's good because it means that information is circulating through the airline pilots and crew members, not through their unions or the corporations that they work for, but through their own networks, blogs, and so forth. And he said, I'm coming to Los Angeles in 4 days, and I said, well, just call me from your hotel room, and I'll talk to you as much as you want. So he called, and we had a 2.5-hour conversation, and he said, I said, okay, tell me what is happening. What are the pilots experiencing, the crew, the passengers, and then what is your union doing about it? And he said, well, all of the pilots are sick, all of them. He said, and some of them are dead,
Oh my
40
God.
years old, 45 years old. And I said, how old are you? And he said, I'm 38, and I have 2 small children, and
Oh my gosh.
of course a wife. And he was frightened. And I said, well, where were you flying? And he said, oh, well, we fly to India from Germany, and we fly to Los Angeles. And I said, well, those are regions where the air is not so contaminated. Where else are you flying? He said, through the North Atlantic, the Great Circle route. And I said, oh, wonderful, because these nuclear storms are being directed by HAARP right along the shoreline, right next to Fukushima, and they're incorporating the Fukushima radiation in the water and the air into the storm front. And then I'm watching it moved across the Pacific towards Alaska. They split it in two with a hot air knife. Our HAARP can do this. And one part will make a loop around the Aleutians and Alaska and then come right down the west coast of the U.S. And the other part goes up over into the Arctic, and it either comes down the central part of Canada and the U.S. and then east, or they direct it down into the North Atlantic, and they punished Iceland for kicking all the Rothschild bankers out, and they hit them with another dose of radiation, and then it's all over Europe, and then they send it on to the Middle East and Central Asia. So I'm watching on the wind map exactly what they're doing.
Wow.
Absolutely, it's very, very clear. It's all depopulation and targeted regions and people and countries. And they never forget the international financiers if you do something that opposes what they want to do.
Sure.
So I explained to him that northern route was the source of the greatest amount of radiation exposure I believe that the pilots were going through. And he said, well, what are the symptoms? Could you tell me what the symptoms are of radiation exposure? So I said, yes, I have a list of 631,000 American soldiers who were fresh soldiers. They've never been on the battlefield. They've never been exposed to nuclear materials as part of warfare. And they were sent to Iraq in 2003. And 2.5 years later, the Veterans Administration did diagnoses on the soldiers who came to the veterans hospitals and said they were sick. And I read the list of the diagnoses. The highest diagnosis was neuromuscular disease. Polio is not a disease. Polio is a manufactured cover-up for the effects of ionizing radiation on the neuromuscular system.
Wow.
From the bomb testing era. And so the second greatest diagnosis, the most common, was brain problems and heart problems. So I went down the whole list of 20 different categories of illnesses, kind of families of illnesses that, poisoning, kidney disease, heart disease, things like that. And then I was through reading it, and I told him how many diagnoses had been made in each category. And there was silence. And I was a little bit nervous about reading that list to him because I'm talking about him, about something very serious, including his imminent death.
Yep.
Eventually. And so I'm always careful about that. And so he didn't say anything, and I said, did any of those sound like something that you have, a complaint? And he was sort of quiet, and then he said, I have all of those.
Oh, man.
He said, we're all sick like that. And I said, that's radiation exposure. And I told him that he should stop flying under any conditions. He shouldn't be flying. He needs to go and sit in saunas every day and sweat those radioactive materials out of him. They do come out in sweat all over your house, by the way. They're in body fluids, so exchanging body fluids with other people is very dangerous, and protection should be used. I told him a diet. The best one that they use in Japan is brown rice, not white rice, brown rice, sukimono, which is pickled Japanese vegetables. I make it myself and eat it every day, and it's macrobiotic. I just buy sauerkraut that's macrobiotic, and I pour the juice out, and I put a couple tablespoons of Japanese vinegar in a jar, and then I slice fresh vegetables and throw them in that with a little bit of salt and fill it up with water. And it's the most delicious, satisfying thing you've ever eaten, because those fresh vegetables that are uncooked have lots of enzymes and things that are killed when we cook the food. And the third element that's very important is something called salty plum paste, or umaibashi. And you can buy that in any Japanese store. It's the salty plums. They make salty plums. And that's very, very healthy, because the salt helps to grab the metals chemically and form metallic salts that are rejected by your body. So that's another way to clean the radiation out of your body.
Excellent information.
Yep.
Excellent information. Loren, we're counting down now.
Oh,
we've just got a minute to go. I've just got one thing. I've got one thing I'd like to show you, seeing as we're here on video. Here, I don't know how well you can see this, but this is a rose from my garden. These are roses from my garden.
Oh, yes.
These have mutations. Do you see this?
Yes,
rose?
I do. Yes.
And now the rose, there's another bud growing through the centre of that bud.
Yes.
Same here.
Oh,
all right,
yes.
Same things going on.
Right.
Mutations, people, look out for them. Nature is screaming at us.
Yes.
There certainly
Look,
is.
do you know what those represent? Those are conjoined twins. That's conjoined twinning, where two twins are grown into each other, and they share organs and so forth. That's in the plant world. That's what you're looking at, and those are mutations from ionizing radiation. And I would like you to tell the audience, Rose, what happens. What's on your cat and dogs when they come into the house from outside?
Well, my guys run out through. I mean, I know we've only got a few seconds here, but like quite briefly. I mean, they'll go outside and they'll come in just coughing. They come in coughing.
Oh.
I've now learned to check the lawn before I let them out, because there's long spider threads out there, or threads that are falling from the sky. Whether they're cleaning up the radiation with this or making it worse, it's all beyond me at this point. But, you know, folks, really, just love your families, learn how to grow your food. If you have to grow it indoors, so be it. We are in the middle of a war. If folks don't want to, you know, folks should not be flying. You should not be, if you do have to fly, then remember your families, because you will go home and you will sweat all over them and pass on your hot particles. You know, your wife, do you love your wife? Think about that. People that fly regularly, pilots, have actually got a lower, and they know it. It's known in their industry that they will have an earlier death.
Yeah.
But, you know, think about it, folks. Get on a ship.
Yeah.
Find other ways.
That's right. That's right.
And share this information.
Yes,
Remember,
definitely share this information.
Right.
Girls, we're out of time. I am so grateful to have had this conversation with both of you, although I didn't do the conversing. I was just listening to both of you, because this information is not really about me. I'm just, the show is the vehicle to be able to bring this information out to everyone. So I thank you very much for being here, Loren. Unbelievable information. Rose, you contributed to information that nobody else, has up to now, because you actually lived there and now you're sharing what you actually experienced, which is absolutely unbelievable experiences as well. You all have been listening to Shattering the Matrix. Again, Loren, if you'd like to share your website with us all again, so if we want to be able to visit it, what is that website?
It's LeurenMoret.info. LeurenMoret.info, and there's lots and lots of information on it.
It's an encyclopedia, right? And Rose, your website is?
Thank you, Ari, for the platform. My website, or our website, is contrail.com. And, if you need a safe place, come over there and join us.
Absolutely, and it's a fantastic place as well. And
Thank you both so much.
Oh, no, thank you, Loren, for being here. My website is 2012emergence.com, and I also welcome you to take a peek in there. You've all been listening to Shattering the Matrix with Loren Moret and Rose Page. My name is Ari Kopel. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Hopefully we'll have Loren again, and as a regular as well. And Rose, I know, probably will be a regular on the show. So thank you all. You have a great evening. Good night.